I've had it before. I'm sure.
Can't figure. Yeah.
First time I use that thing. Oh, first time I use that. All right, everybody, thank you for being here today. Just up front, I will tell you, this will not go a minute past 4:30. And there's potential with our conversations. We could be out of here earlier. But I'd like to call to order the meeting. And if you could all please join me. Stand as able in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody. I again appreciate everybody being here. We've kind of given ourselves a timeline on when we want to have a plan in place, and that may require us having some separate RTA meetings along the way. So I do appreciate all the mayors and Supervisor Scott and everyone to be involved and being willing to make the time to do it. I know it takes time out of incredibly busy schedules as is. Mayor Murphy, I'm glad they let you out and you've at least been able to join us remotely as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Got you loud and clear.
Great. Thank you.
At this point, we'll move on to item number 3, call to the audience. Jamie Brown, you help us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the RTA board. We have no speakers here to speak to the call of the audience. Thanks.
Well, I can say we've had one person be very efficient in their job, gotten through that one. So thank you for that. RTA next plan development. We've talked about already that we know we're targeting to have a plan in place no later than June. Why? Because that will give us enough time to take the plan going forward to the citizens in all the different municipalities that incorporated Pima County, to different organizations, different groups. Remember, on the last RTA, there was somewhere approaching 200 outreach meetings from the time the plan was developed till it was put forward, revised. Remind everybody it was revised, and then put forward from the board to the board of supervisors to place on the ballot. So we've got time. We've got a lot of issues to go. We're sitting. Remember, I'd like to say up front, we still have 2 plans that are under consideration. We've got 4.2, and we've got the hybrid version, which was developed with the support of the TMC, and those are both on the table. We may allude to those today, but I don't think we're ready yet to get into a deep dive on what's in them or what's the direction we should go or what our next step is. As I think everybody's aware, and I'm going to allude to it up front, the city manager of Tucson, Mike Ortega, put out a memorandum to his mayor and council the other day. And tell me we didn't lose Mayor Murphy.
No, I'm here.
Okay, we just couldn't see you for a second. Put a memorandum that's gotten a lot of attention and it's definitely got the press fired up because they've been writing articles about it too. And the city had commissioned George Hammond and the University of Arizona to provide a estimated 20-year TPT economic forecast. They made it at 1.65 billion. When you think about it, ours was 2.3 for the entire region, and everybody went, whoa, well that, now if you say, okay, 165 out of 2.3 is coming. The problem is we've got to remember our estimation is almost 20 months old, I believe, right now. And so I did talk to the executive director, and Mr. Hammond's in the process of giving us an update for the RTA funding stream. So he'll come back and provide us with the increase on both the baseline and what their pessimistic views. I'd like to remind everybody it's not that unusual for us to get an update. We do it normally about every 3 years throughout the entire execution of the RTA. So you can see how things are going. But because of that, that's why I say I'm really hesitant to let's not open the 2 plans up and decide what we like and what we're going for. Because until we know what that number comes to, then we'll have a discussion if we should go with the new number or stay with the old number. Some folks are already on board what their thoughts might be on that. But until we know what that number is, that new estimate, updated the project, they all came in much higher. The only the right thing to do is to update the economic forecast. That number, we're hoping to have it by the March meeting. Then we can get into really building what we want.
Mr. Chair, I don't want to interrupt your opening, but I just wanted to to see if you needed direction, or is it something that do you need direction from the RTA board to get new numbers from George Hammond, or is that just an simple direction that we all have to give the executive director to update those numbers?
Mr. Chair, if I may, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I do not believe that's the case because getting updates to our projections is something we do on a regular basis,
But that's correct, Mr. Chair, and as you mentioned, George is hoping to have it completed by end of March.
so he's been on it probably since a couple of days after the memo came out and trying to get it done. Mayor Honey, did you have something you'd like to add?
Well, are we gonna stay at the pessimistic or the?
Right now, the only thing this board has officially approved is the pessimistic view based on the original view we had 2 months ago. When we get to
Even the update,
that's when we see what those updated numbers is, that's probably the best time to have that conversation. I think most of us are leaning towards the pessimistic. And I think that's maybe a good assumption because today, as you know, on the agenda items that we've all seen, one of the things we're going to be talking about is contingency money, bonding money, and some other things to see what kind of sense from the board we have of what we think will lead to a good plan that the citizens are more likely to get behind. And it does make a difference if we're the pessimistic view on those issues. So I think for today's purposes, we stick with right now. We've only improved a pessimistic view. Let's consider that for today. But that is something that we can address when we get the new set of numbers. So the big thing today is what I'd like to want, because I want it to be worthwhile. I've had several members of the board ask me, are we going to get anything done? And I think across the difference between the plans that we've got in place and the conversations that we had last week, a lot of it was around a couple of the key items that we've got on for discussion, possible action, to include the contingencies, to include how much we want funding we have to have available for debt servicing, to include whether the categorical should be filled with projects or we want to leave some flexibility in there. And then also the discussion, because last time we were talking about within either one or both of the plans, we might want to use and dedicate some PAG funds in the future. I think that's something from a global consideration would be good for us as a board to decide if that's good use of the PAG funds or is it something we'd like to avoid. Doesn't mean it won't be in the final plan. And it doesn't mean anything we decide here can't be negotiated when we get down to that final. But I think it's good to understand from everybody's perspective. And Chairman Jose, thank you for joining us. Join us at the table, please. So today's discussion, I think, has a lot of potential to be vibrant. We may come out with some things we've decided. We may come out with some things that we're still discussing. So. Chairman Jose, thank you for joining us today. It's good to have you at the table. We're looking for your insight and wisdom as well. And as you know, you've entered in a very poignant time with the RTA. We're at the point of trying to get things finalized, and welcome to what could be some very vibrant conversations. So at this point, before we go on to open up those items for discussion, Mayor Romero, you got a quick comment before? I wanted to let the executive director also.
Yes, I just want to make sure that we're all starting from the same page in terms of the conversation. And as you all are aware, our city manager, Mr. Ortega, submitted a memo to the mayor and council February 9th, basically sharing with us George Hammond's and the other colleges assessment of what the city of Tucson residents could produce the next 20 years in terms of sales tax. And so I just want to make sure, and I'll hand it for the record, so that you have it to share with the public. His assessment was that in the pessimistic scenario, that the city of Tucson in the next 20 years would produce approximately $1.65 billion. And so the mayor and council is starting in terms of our assessment of the best return on investment for the citizens of Tucson. We're starting at that place, right? And so this particular memo provided by our city manager was very impactful for the city of Tucson and my colleagues on the council and I. And so I'm gonna submit it to everyone and then hand it into Jackie for the record, so that we're all working from the same place. That's why I really believe that going back, the RTA board going back to George Hammond and the Eller College is really important, because I know that he used different assumptions than what he had used for the RTA forecast, financial forecast. I know that economists throughout the country were thinking 2023 was going to be a recession year. So the assumptions are very, very different now. The numbers that we got are very different now. So I really feel as though we've got to nail down the numbers, both on the forecast and any new forecast that George Hammond and the Eller College get us, but also on the expenses, right? The expenses of how much projects cost. So I just wanted to make sure that I included that information for the record, and I'm happy that that we are going to George Hammond to set the new numbers for this board. I think it would be not the right place to go to make any particular changes to any of the plans today, only because we're not working from actual numbers. At least that's what, you know, we have a feeling in the city of Tucson that would be.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mayor Murphy.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? We switched devices, so I want to make sure you can still hear me all right.
We've got you loud and clear.
Okay, and just a couple of points. I think there would be benefit, at least on these categories, so to speak, that we've been discussing, whether it's contingency. It doesn't have to be linked to a number. I think more about a philosophy. Do we, as an example, do we want a contingency or no contingency? I think those are, you know, appropriate discussions to have. The finality of it, I think, would be linked to the overall economic numbers. But also, you know, as we present the regional plan or consider a regional plan, I hope we all do remember that when sales tax is collected in any of our communities, including the city, that it's, you know, a multiple of residents that contribute to that. So I think of the pot as kind of a multi-jurisdictional, just like the projects would be, I hope, for the most part, be considered multi-jurisdictional. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Murphy. And just so everybody who's either listening online is aware, Mayor Diaz from South Tucson has joined us as well. So thank you, Mayor. It's quite all right. We have time. So I think you're both, your point about the jurisdictions, and I think that's true about all of our jurisdictions. I know Mayor Winkle pointed out the other day that 13,000 Oro Valley folks come and work in the city, and I'm one of them. But there's also 8,000 residents who aren't in Oro Valley that come into Oro Valley to work. So we all have a lot of that. I think that, you know, it's good for us to remember that. I do appreciate, Mayor Romero, the comments about we've got to be able to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. I think a lot of what we've seen in the press at this point has been comparing things that are not equivalent for comparison. And it's important. Mr. Hammond talked with us, and he knows that one of our concerns are the assumptions the same. Varying assumptions will change economic forecasts significantly. So we want to be able to make sure that the numbers that he's provided for the city, because just for everybody's awareness, when he does it for the region, he does it for the region. He doesn't go in and break out the city and Oro Valley and Marana and a couple of comparison. Well, we do that, we get our numbers, but that's not how they do it for region wide. It's considering it all. So it will never be perfect. but it will be updated and it will be more accurate when we can get down to talking about those specifics. So, Executive Director, if there's anything you'd like to add, you have helped craft the agenda. Is there anything you'd like to add to before we start the discussions?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, I thought the last meeting was very productive, and that's where these items came from. You already provided some direction at the last meeting, but coordinating with the chair, we broke it down to separate items. So hopefully we can start talking about each separately.
Good. All right. Well, the first item for discussion on our list is the consideration of contingencies to be set aside in the plans as reserves for economic or inflationary issues. I'll just open up the floor for any of the board members who have any other thoughts. And again, I think we can come to some consensus on what should be a good plan with focus on a plan that the majority of the citizens of the region will want to see these items in. It will make this conversation a little clearer, I guess, as we go through. So, Mayor Honey.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think contingency is very important. There's always things that happen with projects. And when we bid out projects in our community, we put a contingency on the project, but we also have general fund as a backup for that type of stuff. We don't have that privilege here. If it's not in the RTA, that's it. Unless we want to go rob PAG, the STP, or state and federal monies out of there again, which I really hope we don't do. But contingency is always there to make up for things that you don't see. In the first plan, we spent the contingency right away. It was gone. Then we started putting PAG money in the plan. I think about $350 million.
Roughly $300 million. Roughly $300 million to date.
300 million in the plan. And we still came up 200 million short. And the city has one, we have one, the county has one that we're pushing into the next plan. You've got to have a little bit of wiggle. If we don't have that, what happens if a plan runs over? Or what happens if a project has something unforeseen there that is going to cost a lot more money? Where do you get the money? Do you rob it from the next project, or what do you do? So I really think contingency is very important to have a solid plan. Said we've had it before and used it up in the first 3 or 4 years. I mean, it was gone. So if we don't have any, unless every project comes in perfectly as anticipated, which it won't, we're going to be in trouble.
Any other thoughts on contingency, Mayor Winfield?
I'm generally in agreement. My understanding is that RTA's consulting estimator, there's built-in contingency into each of the projects. Is that different from the original RTA?
Sure.
RTA Next, and if so, what is there a rate that was?
Sure, Mr. Chair, Mayor Winfield. I did provide some additional information in the memo in the packet. So yes, they are different. And the main reason for the difference, obviously, is that those individual contingencies for projects are typically for unknown construction related activities, scope. You go out there and you hit a sewer line or a water line. So those are for actual construction contingencies. The contingency we're talking about is for economic downturn or inflationary increases that are not included in individual projects. Individual projects typically set aside about 10% for construction contingency. And that's what Mayor Honey is referencing to, that most of those were gone almost immediately because most projects ended up with variation of scopes or issues that were not identified in the cost estimating. So you got to keep in mind the cost estimating is at a planning level right now. They don't know exactly what the project's going to look like within the next 20 years. So those numbers are estimates. Therefore, they use some contingency for that purpose alone. So this is separate from that purpose.
Mayor Romero, then Supervisor Scott.
My question to everyone is, again, we don't have correct numbers, first and foremost. We don't have the updated assumptions for how much funds the region is going to receive. We do. We have a much more updated financial forecast. But of course, you know, any reasonable person knows, and people that have done project management or people here on this table, we understand that contingencies are necessary. But every single project in the RTA that has been listed is counting with contingency. So for the city of Tucson, we're concerned about adding contingency to the budget because there hasn't been a conversation as to where it's coming from and how much money we have to put into the contingency. So there are many doubts and concerns about voting on the possibility of having a contingency fund that there's no assurances for the city of Tucson how that money is going to be used. I think that the technical management committee should be part of this conversation. They are the technicals, right? They are the engineers. They are the ones that can give us advice in terms of contingency. But as it stands, I just want to ask us, with a really tight budget on both Plan 4.2 and the hybrid, where is the money coming? That's what I would like to.
Thank you, Mayor. Supervisor Scott.
I'm not opposed to having the discussion about contingency, but I wanted to ask a question of the executive director. In the narrative portion of the packet, it's stated that it is imperative to allocate a minimum of 5% of the budget totaling at least $100 million for economic or inflationary contingency. Now, neither the CAC plan that we're still considering 4.2, nor the TMC modified plan that we're also still considering include any funds for economic contingency. So my question to staff would be, if you're recommending a minimum of 5% of the budget, at least $100 million, could be more, where would that come from?
Sure, be happy to, Mr. Chair, Supervisor Scott. That amount was held constant until the very last meeting of the CAC as well as the TMC meeting. So they were not used for any projects until the very last meeting. So at the very last meeting, similar to the discussion you're having today, there was that ongoing discussion that if we need to have more projects, then take it off contingency. And that's what happened at those two meetings.
But that didn't answer the other part of the question, which is where would that come from?
Well,
if we were going to put up to 5%,
yeah, I guess I would say if you go back to previous to those two discussions, there was $100 million that was reserved for that purpose, and then projects were added on. So not as a recommendation, but as a potential option is to go back and look at what was added on to accommodate potentially contingencies.
And Mayor Honey, I'll come right to you real quick. But thing to remember, because we don't have the next number yet, I think the benefit of this conversation is going to continue to be, just as was pointed out so far, everybody's kind of said, well, yeah, we can push not have contingencies. There's always an except in, because we don't know what the numbers will be. We don't know exactly how we're going to have it. The rest, from my point of view, is it's going to have to come from either the compromise plan we get, and that means it could come from all of us, you know, all the different entities around the table to ensure we have that if we think that strongly that contingencies, something the citizens are going to want to see.
and consistent with knowing all those numbers, it would really be helpful to know what is the contingency amount that's built into the projects that's also referred to, because that's not really that's not really clear in terms of the figures that we have right now.
Sure, we can break that out as well.
And that would be great. And I do appreciate your explanation. That might be different contingency funding, but it's good to know what is built in. So, Mayor Honey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, really, I don't think contingency comes from any direct project or ideology within the plan. It's just part of the money collected through going to the voters. If it gets approved, it's just a part of that money. It's not like we're taking it away from a road project or a transit project or whatever. It's just out there. I just think if we don't have some kind of contingency, we're gonna be in big trouble. I've done this once before, and like I said, the contingency was gone very quickly. You don't know what happens. I don't think we'll have another 2008 recession, which I hope we don't. But even if we had to get a few bumps in the road along the way, in 20 years, you're gonna have them. You know, it kind of helps fill in a little bit. And 5%, you know, it's like running a family budget. If you make X amount of dollars, you don't plan to spend every penny of it. Most people will set a little bit aside if part breaks on your car or something happens that you need to spend money, you've got some money to do it. And I just don't, I personally don't think it would be responsible not to have a contingency. And I'm not saying how much, maybe it's 4% instead of 5%, but I think we need to do something. You know?
Mr. Chair, whenever you think it's appropriate.
Mayor Murphy, it's appropriate. You're on.
Okay, thank you. And kind of how with this discussion today, I think where it comes from, you know, after we get the better numbers, I think that's good for a future discussion. From my perspective, as the executive director kind of explained it, you have the construction contingent, which you know, all of us have, both from the private and the public sector, that I've been on the side of both. But I really look at this as the economic contingent. You know, the 20 years is a very long time. We didn't predict a pandemic. We didn't predict a great recession. And I think it would be foolish not to at least consider having an economic contingent for those unknowns, especially after a very long period of time, and trying to learn from our past. I mean, you know, we've talked many, many times about how we ate up that economic contingent, you know, very, very quickly, and then had to go sweep. So I'm a big supporter of having, and again, we can determine where it comes from, 4%, 5%, but I think it would be foolhardy not to at least acknowledge that having an economic contingent would be very important moving forward. Thank you.
Mayor Honey, then Supervisor.
You know, another thing, what we kind of used this last time with our RTA plan is we use PAG as the contingent. And I really don't want to do that. PAG was set up to do other things in all of our communities. You know, emergency floods or things happen or something, so that the region can have a certain amount of money to help do things. I think if we don't have a contingency collected in the general amount of money collected, not from any one project, are we going to say that the PAG is the 45 million a year that we get, you know, the state and federal funds? Is that contingency? Because I don't know if that's a very good plan. And really, PAG's a different entity, but I mean, we've given money before.
And I do recall, to your point, Mayor, I do recall some conversations that we acknowledged what wasn't going to get done. That's the responsibility of PAG when those monies were determined to transfer out. There were other things that fall under a PAG hat and purview for regional expenditures that we were sacrificing. So I understand that point. Supervisor Scott, then Mayor Roman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're all content to wait until we get the forecast that Mr. Hammond is going to deliver us in March, and we have more solid numbers to work with. But you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Chair, that you thought that the board might still be leaning towards going with pessimistic projections. If that's the case, do we necessarily, and I'm willing to discuss contingency, please don't get me wrong, if we go towards the pessimistic projections, could we accomplish having a contingency plan in place through a policy statement as opposed to settling on a set amount of either 4% or 5%? You know, both numbers I've heard. Couldn't we plan for contingency by having some kind of statement of how we would plan for it, given how things might change from year to year?
Could I? That's my friend here. Where are you gonna get that money? I mean, if you do a plan, it's just a piece of paper. There still has to be, where are you gonna get it? Are you gonna go to PAG to get it? Is that where it's gonna be, or are you gonna?
Didn't say that.
No, but
Didn't say
it's
that.
gotta, you gotta get
Right.
it somewhere.
Absolutely.
There's no contingency. It's just, we hope to have a contingency. It's not a contingency.
No, I think I think a policy statement, if we went that route, Mayor Honey, would have to be very detailed and precise in terms of where we would derive additional revenues if it was needed. I'm just asking if we can consider that as a possibility, as opposed to saying it's a set percent. But I'm willing to consider that as well once we get more solid numbers, including the breakout of how much is included in contingency for the various projects. And by the way, I take as, and I think we all do, that the overlap funding amount, the 40 million for overlap is just a given.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond to that, thank you. Good comment. I just want to make sure we're all clear on the pessimistic versus baseline. Those models are purely a growth model. They don't anticipate any downturn in the economy or any inflation. So when we talk about pessimistic scenario, it's just assuming a less healthy growth versus more healthy growth. So downturn in the economy is not in those models. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that.
Mayor Romero.
Yeah, on the contingency as it stands right now, again, we have no numbers to make decisions on, right? And all of us are financially responsible. We budgeted before, but I have a lot of questions in terms of what the numbers are going to look like. So I agree that we should keep this conversation alive until we have numbers. So based on the numbers that we were working on out of, the city of Tucson's a share of, or the return on investment to Tucsonans was already not adequate enough. And with the new numbers that we've received, the possibility of leaving $650 million in 20 years on the table for the city of Tucson, that's more than $500 million for the city of Tucson with the numbers that we currently have and the plans that we have in front of us. So very naturally, I'll understand that the city of Tucson and my colleagues on the council, as the memo from Mr. Ortega says, it would be the not recommended and not fiscally responsible for the city of Tucson to be able to stay at the table based on the numbers that we have. That's why I think when we start talking contingencies, of course, the responsibility that we have is to be as careful as possible. But again, where is the money coming from? Because what we currently have, the city of Tucson residents are already squeezed. It is, I tend to disagree, if we do put $100 million for contingency in whatever plan, it would prevent us from investing that money in projects. So it is something that we have to, that we really have to consider carefully. Again, where's that money coming from?
And Mayor Romero, again, I'm going to frame a little bit about why I still felt the conversations today. We could have very easily just canceled this meeting and say, we're going to wait 2 months. One, I don't think we have 2 months to wait. So part of the discussions the reason I asked the executive director to build an agenda with these topics on it.
Mhm.
The conversations we're having now will make conversations when we get the numbers much simpler. Because we have already discussed this. What I'm hearing as a consensus around is everybody believes that having contingency in a plan isn't a bad thing. Concern is, what are the total numbers we've got? We won't know that. And I appreciate the city manager's opinion from the memorandum. I appreciate the mayor and council's concerns with leaving all that money on the table, but we don't know what we're comparing it to yet. So we're not sure if it's going to be 32 million a year that on the table or less, because a lot of the money, if we put money in contingencies, guess what? That's going to lower the percentage that goes to every municipality. There's some of these issues are ones that will not result in direct investment, but providing maybe assurance of getting projects done, maybe, I mean, and we've got 5 of them to talk about, but so what my goal of this was to establish if overall, do we all agree that there should be contingencies? And so that when we come in and we get the new numbers, now when we say, and I'm going to go on the low side from some of the numbers I've heard thrown out there, let's say it comes back in 2.6. So we've got 300 million. Maybe the first thing we do is take some of that, put it in contingency because it's money we didn't have. And then we look at where we can put it in other projects or in the categoricals. It allows us a baseline of, okay, these are what I call the generic things, contingencies, bonding if we want it, using other outside sources of money like PAG. Do we really want to do that? If our goal is not to do that, then that's just our goal. So we see the numbers. You're all right. We won't be able to get to the details, but we've already decided what, as an ordinance, as a group, the board, our goal for this plan, it will make it that much easier for us to build the plan.
Mr. Mogimi, is the TMC meeting soon?
I believe it's the second Wednesday in March.
Before our meeting.
Would the TMC be able to help, since they're the technical experts, on what would be a good approach and amount for contingency, especially because I agree with Supervisor Scott that building in contingency in each and every project is important. So we've got to be as careful as we possibly can with the contingency that we put on the budget, because again, numbers matter. And as we stand, even with a TMC hybrid plan, which would put about $1 billion back into the city of Tucson's needs, that is already short. So I would really like the TMC to jump in as well, knowing of course that we don't have the correct numbers and we don't know exactly how we would divvy up any new numbers, even if it's a pessimistic number. But I agree. I mean, I want to reiterate something that Supervisor Scott said, which is we're already going with a pessimistic plan, right? We chose to use those numbers, and that should give us a cushion as we move forward, needing less and less a big chunk of money for contingency. We're already building in contingency using the pessimistic perspective.
Mayor Winfield.
Mayor just kind of stole my thunder here a little bit, but I'll just add that I'm in agreement. I think it kind of speaks to what you were saying, Chair, in terms of when we get these numbers, if they exceed, then I think that that is an opportunity to set those monies aside. I think it's a good idea to get some input from TMC. But I think the fact that I think as a board, because we've selected that pessimistic, it does have a built-in contingency. But I also think too, Supervisor Scott, maybe that's where a policy statement is needed, so that if revenues exceed that pessimistic, and there's that is set aside then for contingency is one possibility. Right. Otherwise, I think the tendency is, I mean, we've all got more projects than we have revenue. right? So if there isn't some discipline, some policy about how those revenues that we didn't expect, that I think there has to be some discipline to set that aside as contingency, if we're in agreement that that's important.
And Mayor Winfield, I think that's a great point. I know during a lot of the CAC discussions, one of the things they wanted is they wanted to be able to provide us with what they thought their policy recommendations to the board would be. And I know Chair McGovern's here too. And if at any point there's anything you'd like to add, just let us know. But that was one of them. And I do think, especially if we're going to go again with best method of use, the idea of us having several policy issues, and one that completely different topic, but I'd like to see us consider too, is how often we, as a board, or have the TMC review the plan going forward. Because we aren't, what we didn't have on a lot of the projects, and you saw a lot of projects that were not built exactly like they were put in the voters. That's going to make the executive director get nervous because I said that out loud. But it was stuff that the board, the community, all worked through, and some of them were painful. Getting through the change to the Broadway road was a process. First Avenue, we've been part of that. There's been some that have been expanded that have been easy, and there's been some that have been taken aside at the request of the municipalities. So I think if we can set policy statements in the plan that will say how we're going to deal with those, if it's a 5-year, 10-year, whatever review, I think it's something that after we decide the rest of the things on the plan, we then go back and fill in the policies to address those areas where we might leave gaps. Because we may take some chance on the contingencies because we're using a pessimistic view. Then we maybe want a policy statement, like you said, Mayor Winfield, on where we're going to. So, Aaron, did I see your hand up? Did you have another comment?
Trying to refrain. You know, I think what we're talking about here, and with all due respect to the city and to Mr. Ortega's information that he gave to us, this is a regional plan. And if we're all going to say, you know, I pay in this much of the plan, so I'm getting that much out of the plan, it's not going to work. And that includes Marana as well. We have to build regional projects. And use Cortero, for example. If you spend a couple $100 million, about half comes from the state, but $100 million of our money on that plan, it will benefit the city and the county as much as Marana. Our business district there is built out. It's not going to help us. We're not going to build any more in here. In fact, it would hurt our business district to even build the thing, but it helps the region. You know, to say that's strictly Marana money is not true. It benefits everybody. Ruth Rock Interchange was built in the county, but it helps Marana and it helps the city and it helps a lot of other people. And I think if we're going to take the thing that we put in this much money, we're going to get that much out, we're going to be in a jam. I can tell you, Marana did a research on our sales tax a few years back. Over half the sales tax we collect in Marana, which is very retail heavy, is from outside Marana. Folks in Abra Valley and Picture Rocks and even the city of Tucson and different places. I mean, you know, if we're going to go that route, we're not going to have a regional plan. And I think we have to look at what benefits the region. You know, if I build an interchange and it helps get people to work in the city or to the university or something like that, it's in my town. I'm not the only one that benefits. It's going to benefit county residents coming through that interchange to get into the city to work or go to school. And I think if we're going to make the argument on this is how much I gave and I want every dime of it back, then I think we're going to really be in trouble and have a hard time.
And Mayor Oni, I agree with what you're saying, but I'm also not hearing that that's the, there's right now what we're at is the city's done their review, and the numbers that they came in are significantly a large portion, and it'd be wrong, I think, for anybody, and I guess I'm probably the only non-elected official on this board, so it makes it a little easier to say what you as the elected officials do. But I think it'd be wrong for any of the groups that you represent, not to consider, okay, what are we contributing, whether it's through sales tax collection, I think, and what are we receiving? There's got to be a balance in there, because sometimes all of us will leave money on the table. But as we get the final numbers, we can start comparing the apples to apples, and we find out what the differences is. That's when I think we have that discussion. There's some of these funds that are going to be used that are very obviously for the good of the region, the contingency, the other things. And then there's some projects that have more regional impact, and there's some projects that are going to have local impact. And that's part of the process. I was just going through the 5-year state transportation plan with Rod Lane, our district director. We got 4 projects, real what I'd call projects. We got some lighting issue with some ones. We got some small ones. We got 4 projects because guess what? We effectively spent almost all. There's one project in there, Irvington, that was an RTA project. We've already done that. And that's what we can expect if we don't have a regional transportation. So I think everybody knows and understands the importance of that. As we get the final numbers, that's what, from March to May, hang on. That's when we're going to have to figure out how to get. And I think what I'm hearing today so far is I've heard Mags, the director's recommendation to us would be that we consider 5% for contingency of the overall, just as a 5%. And I've understood you correct. That would be your recommendation. And I've also heard from Mayor Romero the desire to the TMC to take a look at it and see what they think percentage-wise, not dollar-wise, because we start talking dollar-wise, we start worrying about the 2 plans that we've got, that we're going to have to figure out how to bring together. Just what they think from a percentage-wise would be a good number based on what that contingency money is to be used for. So I do think we're all in agreement that contingencies are good. I think we need more input from the TMC. So I don't know if we need to give the TMC direction, executive director, or if that's something that we can just get added. And then when about March, hopefully we'll know the numbers, and then we'll also know what the TMC thought contingency wise versus what's recommended by the executive director. And then knowing the numbers, we can decide what we should do. Mayor Romero, then supervisor.
Mr. Chair, I think that adding a little bit more, drilling down to more detail in terms of what we've been hearing today, I hear that there's a few of us that are asking if there's going to be additional contingency, where is the money coming from? And then 2, something that I've heard both from Supervisor Scott and Mayor Winfield and myself is it seems as though there's a built-in contingency when we went ahead and chose the most pessimistic financial scenario. So, and then also adding that our technical management committee should weigh in terms of what's the most appropriate percentages, right? Because individual projects already carry contingency. And then with all due respect to my dear colleague, Mayor Honey, nobody else is in my mind and in the numbers that we have in front of us put together by a financial expert and the Eller College. The numbers that we are looking at, as you said, are in the next 20 years, the city of Tucson, through its taxpayers, is going to generate about $1.65 billion. I don't know if you all would stand in front of your voters in Oro Valley, any of the other towns around us, and tell your voter, I'm leaving $20 million a year for the next 20 years for the good of the region. I've got to be able to stand in front of my voters and be able to tell them this particular plan will be a good return on investment for our taxpayers. And I've got to be able to do that with authenticity and knowing that we're getting a good deal for our voters. Regional cooperation and participation in the RTA with our regional partners has value, but $650 million, more than $500 million, compared to if we were to go at it alone, is outrageous. And I don't think any of you would be able to stand in front of your voters and tell them it's a good deal for our residents. So, in order to be able to pass an RTA next, the voters of Tucson have to be able to feel as though there's a good return on investment, not just the superfluous, there's value in being regional.
Mayor Honey.
One very short comment. I mentioned that Miranda did a sales tax study and showed, and I think you'd find it in Oro Valley and Sarita as well, that a lot of times more of our sales tax comes from the county and areas around us, that people come in and shop in our business, stay in our hotels, even our restaurants or whatever. You know, a large amount of that money in the city. I'm not arguing that the city doesn't collect the majority of the money. People from Marana, Oro Valley, Pima County, the tribe, the nation, shop in Tucson every day. It's not just your taxpayers paying that money. There's people from the region that shop in all of our entities and pay taxes, you know. I mean, it's if it was just people in the city paying the tax, I think you have a good argument, but it's not. It's all of us that shop. I shop in the city some, you know. It's kind of that kind of thing. And I'm saying I just want us to concentrate more on being regional than, you know, how much we collect. And that.
Supervisor Scott.
I just wanted to say that we committed to a hard stop at 4:30, and we've only been talking about the contingency item.
Are you questioning my chair magic? No, we'll get.
Oh, no,
I understand.
it's collaborative guilt.
Well, it's the same I'll be real honest, the same disagreements that we've heard around this on contingency can also be the same thing that we're going to hear around at the all for these next ones. So I think getting those out of the way up front is good. I do believe getting the actual data from George Hammond will help us, one, hopefully take away some of that difference that the city of Tucson does see from the 161.65 to the approximately 1 billion that's in the current plans. And so that will address some of that. But what I go back to, and I asked the executive director to make sure that the TMC does take up the idea of what they think for economic and the reasons that aren't collected in the contingency there, what they think would be an appropriate amount, so we can have that from a standpoint. We know what the recommendations, and then when we see the new numbers, we will know. Because Mayor, you've said several times, where is it coming from? I'm going to be real blunt. I'm hoping where some of it's coming from is from whatever the increased number we get from PAC. I know I've heard reference to 2.9 billion over the time. If that's what the numbers comes back in, you know, hallelujah. I think that's probably higher than we're going to see, but we are going to see an increase. And what I want to do before we get there, because we can get there and then immediately start saying, okay, what projects do we want to back? Well, we're just going to put projects back in. We're not addressing the contingency, which I get a consensus that and it's just my gut feeling on the consensus that we all think, yeah, there's some benefit to having contingency. How big it is will be determined by what that number is and what we do want to do. Because we all, I think Mayor Honey or Supervisor Scott, what we said, we all have many more needs for infrastructure than we've got funding to pay. So we can fill it with projects all day. But that may not be the smart thing going forward with the voters. And I've definitely wrote down, you know, built-in contingency. I've captured all those notes, and I've also captured the need and the points, because I've heard it a couple times on, no matter where we put this money, we probably as a board have to outline what our policy positions are and what we're going to do, especially if we're on the pessimistic one with some of the funds that come from. Not necessarily all of them. Flexibility is good, but we might need to address what we do with some of them.
And I just need to finish up so that we can continue with the rest of the items. How can I stand in front of the Tucson voters and tell them, if we go at it alone, we stand to make in the pessimistic $1.65 billion for the projects that we need, versus if we go at it with the regional approach, we stand to lose $650 million all for the regional cooperation. That's going to cost us $650 million, more than $500 million, because we want to be nice. and we want to be region. That, I cannot in good conscience do that, because then the Tucson voters are going to say, well, why don't we just go at it alone? You've been spending 4 years on that board and you really haven't done much, right? Nobody's moved. Nobody has moved here. We are being asked in the city of Tucson to do acrobatics in the name of the regional approach, right? And so the voters are going to ask me, why are we spending more than 4 years and still not getting any results if we can do it alone and be better off? So that is, I'm just trying to put this out so that my colleagues understand that's what the voters are going to ask me. And I've mentioned it previously in our last meeting. You know, the voters of the city of Tucson, we're more than 100+ year old city. Our infrastructure is 100+ years old. We have great needs in our community. And our voters, by the way, also, we've done the Prosperity Initiative in partnership with Pima County. We know the percentages of poverty that we have inside of the city of Tucson. Our median average income is $54,000 a year versus the median average income in Oro Valley, Sahuarita, and Marana is $74,000 a year. So what does that mean to me as the mayor? Right? The poorest of the poor are putting $650 million on the table to hand out in the name of regional approach to the areas of our community that are better off. That is what I'd like to make sure that you all leave with today. And by the way, even after the last 4 years, we've been having a very similar conversation that we are having today. There has been no budging, no movement.
And Mayor, I'd like to just address that, because I was one that when we start this, when I was on the Citizens Advisory 5 years ago, I said, I'm not sure why we're doing this now. There's no incentive. I'll tell you why there's been movement, and there has been. All due respect, and I think that some of those, there's been movement. That what we're looking at now between 4.2 and the hybrid, that's how I'm referring to them now, is 4.2 and the hybrid. There's been a lot of movement over what we were at 5 years when we started. There's no doubt. We're still not there. But we are now up against an end. And the thing that, as a region, I've tried not to use the regional term all the time, then I'm going to go to Mayor Winfield. He got his hand up. Is, remember, there's an unincorporated area of Pima County that does pay in businesses that are in those areas into the RTA. The RTA goes away. I don't have a sales tax. Nothing else there, nothing additional. A lot of those citizens probably be happy about it. But the fact of the matter is, we then as a region give up funding too. So my hope is the new numbers will alleviate some of the city's concerns. But again, I don't think anybody's going to get what you could all say is your fair share for what. I'm just going to tell you that. And I don't collect anything. So, yeah. Mayor Winfield.
I don't see it as a loss. I mean, I have residents that travel to Sarita, that travel to Tucson, that travel to Marana. They're really just thinking about getting from A to B, and I see our role as helping to facilitate that so that our taxpaying residents can travel as easily as possible to these various destinations. So I don't see it as a loss. I was in a restaurant recently. I asked the waitress if she lived in Oro Valley. She told me she lived in Sarita. So, as I've said, we've got approximately 13,000 of our residents that leave Oro Valley every day. And I can guarantee you they're not thinking when they travel to wherever that, okay, now I'm on Oro Valley streets, now I'm on Pima County streets, now I'm on City of Tucson streets or whatever. They're just concerned about getting from A to B. So I don't see it as a loss to my to the people of Oro Valley. working together to improve the transportation system that we all benefit from.
All right, so what I'd like to do, I think we've trust me, this is part of the conversations I wanted to get out on the table, because if we wait till we have all the numbers and then we try to do it, we dive right into the projects. These conversations aren't as easy to have. We've done it with contingencies, so I think we've got some guidance for the TMC, hopefully to bring back. We kind of know our conversations. We've set up some of the other issues when it comes time to talk about contingencies throughout the year. So the other one, the next one that we had on the area was the directions that we're going to put aside for debt service. One of the advantages of a 20-year plan is that it lets us identify, you, Executive Director, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I've heard you say this type of work. We identify the income stream that's coming in. Therefore, we can take advantage and bond it and get projects done, because infrastructure projects are expensive. We try to go pay-go. It's not quite as easy when we know as a regional transportation authority we can get some of these projects done, and bonding helps get to them earlier. So I'd like to just get the thoughts from the members of the board of what we should have in here for bonding, or if bonding should be included at all. I'll just say it because that's always an option. So Mayor Honey, then Supervisor Scott.
I'm the only one that was here for the duration of first RTA, and I'll give you some examples of where bonding is so important. When we hit 2008 and the world came to an end as we know it, you know, it was the worst recession we've had in over a century, and nobody was making any money and everything else. What we did as the committee is we went out and bonded, and I think it was like 600 million. I mean, it was a big portion of what we were going to collect. And the reason we did that is we had transportation builders and different people coming in and saying, look, I'm willing to do jobs. I don't have to make a profit. If I can make my payment on my equipment and pay my personnel, I just want to keep my business afloat or I'm going to go out of business. I'll do this project. Say it was going to be 100 million. I'll do it for 70. We figured out that even though we were paying interest on bonds, the savings was bigger than the interest. So if the bond interest is 5% and you save 10, you still save 5% on that project in the long run, and you paid it out over the thing. Bonding has been really, really important. Also for very large projects. I mentioned RTA, that I think benefits the county, the city, and Rappahannock equally as far as moving traffic. If you don't have bonding capacity and that you're going to have a little bit of bond debt on it, you're not going to be able to get those projects done until whatever. I turned it on so I could keep track of the chairman and his 4:30, but
I'm promising you all, we will be done at 4:30.
turning it off again. No, but what I'm saying is bonding is a really important tool. In the first RTA, we used that tool, and we did projects in every entity. Most of them were in the city and the county, but we went out and did those projects because we were able to get them done cheaper. And we did some of them even before they were slated, because we were able to get them done so cheaply and then paid them back with the bond debt. Well, you still have to pay interest on bonds, you know, so that's one of those things. So I think bonding is a really, really good tool. And I can tell you in the town of Marana, we're building a community center right now. We've bonded 50 million, which for us is a big project. But, you know, if in order to get it done, you get the money up front and pay it off over a few years. So I think bonding is really important to use as a tool. And it's not necessarily just you're going to lose money on bond debt. I think it gives us a little bit of flexibility.
Director, could you give us an insight how much money was in the first RTA for bonding?
Sure. $100 million was set aside as reserve for bonding, and if I may add to that, just a little bit more perspective. So that information is obviously really important to our rating agencies. When we met with the rating agencies, they pointed that out as a plus. And obviously setting aside that reserve was an indicator that we are worthy of being able to borrow money. So it is critical.
And when we exceed either the 100, or if we were to put no bonding in and then started bonding, where would those funds come?
It would have to come from projects. If you don't have a reserve set aside for bonding, then at that point, the board would have to decide where the money comes from. And most likely, if the projects are fully named, then it would come from the projects.
Supervisor Scott.
So I recognize the need for bonding capacity, especially at the beginning of the 20-year period when we're still waiting for revenues to come in. But consistent with our desire to get additional information from the TMC, let's remember that the hybrid plan puts aside $37 million for bonding, whereas the CAC plan did $77 million. So I would like some input not only from the TMC about why they made that $40 million cut, but also I'd like to get some input from them about project phasing. Because unless we know which project, unless we have some sense, and I realize that that can't be written in stone, but unless we have some sense of which projects are going to happen in which phase, it's going to be difficult to determine just how much we would need for bonding. Not arguing about whether or not we need it, I think we do, but there's that distinction between the two plans in terms of how much and project phasing. I think that's more input I'd like.
Mr. Chair?
To add to that, I'm sorry.
Come to you, Mayor
No.
Murphy. Next, let me go. I'd like to get the executive
Absolutely,
to
absolutely.
respond to that, and to include, when does the phasing of the projects get determined?
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. So that is a requirement on the ballot. We have to demonstrate which projects are going to start within which 5-year period. So every single project would have period 1, 2, or 3, or 4, and then that information can be used to demonstrate how much cash flow you're going to need in the first period, and then we can even come back and project at what point do we need to bond for.
So again, the management professionals thought that we needed $40 million less than the CAC. I just want to get a sense from them about how they arrived at that, if they're still comfortable with that figure. And again, maybe that needs to wait until we get those projections in March. But I think that's another area where we need updated information.
And before I go to Mayor Murphy, I just agree with you on that position. And when the TMC talks about both, again, I'm hearing me say it a lot, what the goal would be, what we'd like to see. So they're going to come back with what they think would be good percentage wise on that. I'd like to see them what they think would be good for a number if they weren't constrained. Remember, we put a lot of pressure on the TMC to come up with the hybrid plan to bring back to us, and that was fiscally constrained. Okay, so if they didn't have the fiscal constraints, because if we get some money, then we maybe can use that money to get some of these, what we all say are important, but we're treating as would be nice to have in exchange for projects. So it's something I just like to get from them, from their technical expertise, what they'd like. Mayor Murphy.
Yes, no, I would agree with that, General. And, part of it also is that, the one point is, do we want to save for a house, or do I want a loan for a house, and do I want to enjoy it, 20 years earlier? And to Mayor Honey's point, and then not pay 2 or 3-fold when I have it. But, I'm also hearing when we're looking at TIs and things like that, numbers were like $50 million typically. Now I'm hearing numbers of, approaching $200 million. So, hopefully the TMC can kind of weigh in from that as well, because I think if anything, based on their feedback, probably more bonding based on construction costs and cost overall are more important this time around than probably even last time. But I'll wait for their feedback. Thank you.
I'm sorry if I may, that just reminded me, and Mayor Honey touched on it too. So thank you, Mayor Murphy, for that comment, because even in the first plan, all ADOT projects required cash up front. So we had to actually go and bond and give the entire cash to ADOT before they even agreed to do the projects.
And I do not see that policy from ADOT change.
I have a question. So in terms of bonding for the current RTA, was bonding only needed in the first phase, or has it been bonding through all phases?
So, Mr. Chair, Mayor Winfield, so the recession really did a number on everything. So as the bids started coming down, we realized that, as Mayor Honey said, that's a good opportune time to bond and get some of the projects out. So we bonded in 2011 and then again in 2014, while the bidding environment was still very competitive. We have not bonded since then, and the entire cost of that was roughly $75 million to date. So we've paid $75 million to date to be able to get those projects done early on. I don't anticipate for the remaining 2-3 years to have to bond for anything, but then again, that's a policy decision. If you have projects that are ready to go, shovel ready, and if you don't have the cash flow, then bonding is a good tool.
So the bonding was at least needed in the first couple.
2011 and 2014.
Romero.
In regards to bonding, I know that bonding is good, especially as Mayor Honey talked about it. 11 and 14 were, especially 11, the economy was still absolutely in the dumps, and the percentage of interest rates were really, really low. And so it made sense to go out to bond because of the interest rates being at historic lows. And being able to put out funds into the economy made sense, right? The construction companies were saying like give us money because we don't have, we want to be able to stay in business. And so I understand the possibility of bonding, but borrowing money always costs money. And so very close to what Mayor Murphy said, it can cost us money, and and we have to be very careful of interest rates, et cetera. The possibility of bonding should be there, but I don't think it should be the first option for us to build, especially because we have to be very attentive to the interest rates and what borrowing that money means to the budget. So again, where are we going to take it from? And what are we not going to build if we choose to go out bonding? I don't think we need to make the decision right now. I like the idea of having TMC give us the technical expertise on this as well. But, as any family should do, we should do here, which is really be careful when it comes to borrowing money if it doesn't make financial sense in the long run.
I'm going to go to Mayor Winfield real quick. But any bonding we do still comes to the board. Even though if we put money aside, that doesn't mean RTA, the execution of RTA can blindly bond. It still has to come to the board for approval. Is that correct?
Correct. There's an extensive process, and obviously the governing body has to have a resolution and a commitment to pay back. It's a very extensive process.
So all this would do is set aside some money so that we had it available and we wouldn't have to, if we decided to bond, go and pull it off of a project. If 19 years go through the thing, we still got whatever money we put into bonding, it's still sitting there that we can use. We can always make that decision to move it away. Mayor Winfield, then Mayor Honey.
The bonding in 11 and 14 saved money?
Yes.
Okay, enough. And in terms of getting those new numbers, it seems like what would also be helpful in informing this discussion would be the phasing of projects, the scheduling of projects, because that could also help inform contingency. It could also inform debt and service. So I think the sooner we can have that schedule of projects, the better.
So
Be happy to again.
When did that begin?
So that conversation was ongoing, and the last discussion we had was as soon as we have a list of projects, the next step is to start identifying which phases. So now that we're down to 2 lists, we can start that process. We've already requested suggestions from individual sponsors. it should not surprise you that everybody wants to do it in the first 5 years. So, so we have to go back and now make it a realistic phasing.
Well, I would suggest that you start taking a look at that because there's a lot of commonality between the projects,
Yep.
you know, on both the two that we're going to use as our basis for getting to a final solution. So that would be, I think Mayor Winfield's right. That would be very helpful. So, Mayor, how do you, Mayor?
You know, a lot of the things with bonding too, it would probably be used in the first half of RTA Next if we do bonding. Because bond companies aren't gonna loan you tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. You got a debt service time in there too. So we're not gonna go out and bond for a big bunch of money right now because we only have 2 years left in the plan. I mean, you almost can't bond. But in the first half, if even the first 3 5-year periods, you might be able to, if you have time to pay back. And Mayor Winfield asked a very good question, which is, did we save money? We bonded because interest rates were low and prices were low from construction companies. They were just trying to stay afloat. And we actually saved more money than the bonding cost us, but we still have to have money for the bond.
Mayor Romero, did you have more comments? I added you after Mayor Honey, but I
No,
didn't know if it was.
not important.
Okay. Well, I think we've got a good discussion on bonding to move away there. I'm going to jump to item D because I think it may be a little bit easier than item C, and then we're going to make sure we're done at 4:30. So this is about the discussion and direction on basically if we can use PAG fund. You know, if that's something as we go forward in order to maximize the base, effectively what we do is maximizing the projects and some, or potentially the contingencies, or if we use PAG funding. But it was something that was presented to us as a board really for the first time when they came with the hybrid model. So I'd really like to hear what the board members think about using this money we're given to do PAG functions for RTA. Mayor, Tony, then Mayor.
I have an opinion on all this stuff.
Don't set yourself up.
When we, a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, when we were getting ready to start RTA Next, I think the board voted not to use PAG money. Or we certainly were talking about that. That doesn't mean that it's not the contingency on the contingency if the world's coming to an end. But, you know, PAG was here before the RTA ever existed. And that money was used in projects. Most of the money was used in the city and the county. Because that's where most of the need was for these projects that you can cover through that. And there was some HERF money there, and there was some, you know, revenue sharing from the state and federal monies. If we start using that money up, you know, we've used it for the last, what, 6 years?
Almost 10 years,
Almost 10?
since 2013.
So, I mean, instead of being able to do those projects, and again, I think I brought it up the last time we were here. We had flooding in 90s, you know, we've had different things to where, and I don't care where it's spent. It's kind of regional protectionism for that kind of stuff. You have massive fires and it caused a lot of problems, or you have flooding that caused a lot of problems. If you don't have that PAG money, the region really can't do anything. It can't really help us out. And that's why I'm saying that money wasn't in there for RTA. That PAG money's been there for 40 years.
And Mayor Honey brings up a good point. Just for clarification, so what we're talking about is the last plan, when the plans were percentages, there was already a guaranteed use as part of making the numbers work for the plan of PAG money. So that's the question is, do we want to even consider using PAG money in advance for the plan if the plans that the resources that the plans or RTAs generating itself aren't sufficient for the plan we've created? So that's kind of the conversation. Mayor Romero, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to call into, you know, question how handout is in terms of the different plans. I would really like for us to call the 4.2 plan and the TMC hybrid plan. It's very confusing how everybody's using different names for what we have in front of us. At our last meeting, we eliminated 5.1, so we should call it CAC 4.2 plan and the TMC modified or hybrid plan. And I'm seeing that as presented here by the RTA staff, it's very confusing in terms of how the funds are presented regarding the TMC recommended that we use $75 million of PAG future funds. And the way it's presented here under the TMC draft plan, it eliminates 75 million in PAG funds, but it puts it in another column and then subtracts it from the subtotal of the hybrid plan, of the TMC hybrid plan. So it is very, very confusing. And so I would like to request that that be clarified or modified so that it reflects the $75 million in the TMC modified hybrid plan. And then there's also, I'm noticing that under the safety element and active transportation element, the TMC draft plan funding request does not show the projects, the region-wide and Tucson projects that were presented and approved and moved forward by the TMC on that particular side of the TMC. So it's very confusing and presents the numbers in different interpretation, I would call it. So I just want to call attention to that. When it comes to using PAG funds into the future, TMC believed at the time, and the jurisdictions at the time believed that we should put PAG funds forward in order to be able to accomplish region-wide needs. And so I believe that we should commit to being able to use the regional funds that come in through the state and federal government to be able to complete the priorities that all of the jurisdictions have said we want to complete.
And I think as we get new numbers, Mayor Romero, then I'll come to Mayor Winfield, is the question I've got is, do we want to make that commitment before we go to the voters? Because we've done it. I mean, for the last 10 years, this board has moved PAG funding to cover the commitment made in RTA. So, but do we want to build a plan where we're already committing it, knowing going forward? Now, again, this will be critical depending on what numbers come through by our update. Regarding the name, if we could, unless anybody's got a problem with the name, I would really like to go to just calling them CAC 4.2 and the TMC hybrid. I just think it's straightforward, it's short, and it's simple, and it gets away. Remember, CAC 5.1, which was also brought forward by the CAC, was considered last week or last month, and unanimously was removed because a large part because the TMC hybrid contained a lot of what the lot of discussions about that led to CAC 5.1. There were some changes, but the language is getting people confused. So if we could just go down to the two remaining plans, CAC 4.2 and TMC hybrid. Mayor Winfield.
I'm going to give the floor to Mayor Horn because he had his hand up and just didn't see it before me. And I'll follow.
I have a,
He told me that he's going to wave like this every time. I see him. Mayor.
thank you. Yeah. What's the makeup of the TMC?
The TMC consists of representatives from every jurisdiction. So you got the 9 members, each have 1 representative. Kimmie County has 2, City of Tucson has 3, and then we have 6 private technical citizens that serve on the TMC as well. I believe currently our roster is about 19 people or 21.
Because, I'm of the belief this executive board should make most of the decisions on what we're doing. If you go to the TMC, and, city has 3, the county has 2. All of a sudden you start changing what we're doing. I mean, I can understand sending it to the TMC, and I talked to our person on the TMC. And we've been outvoted by the city and the county on a couple projects at the TMC because you have more members there. And I just, to throw all this stuff back to the TMC to make the decisions, I think I think there's a reason to do that.
And Mayor, I agree with you. I think the TMCs are technical experts. We've talked about it when we accepted the 2 plans from the Citizens Advisory Committee. We kind of said, thank you. You've given us what you want. You still exist. You've got there. Chairman McGovern's here right now. And I guarantee you there are plenty of people in the CAC that are still being engaged with outreach on issues. But TMC, they obviously serve as our technical advisors. So I guess what I've heard today is what we're throwing back to them isn't the whole plan. It's we want their input on the bonding, what they think is a good amount to have there. We want their input on contingencies. So it's somewhat limited. They're going to continue to meet because they serve RTA 1 and they'll be serving for RTA next.
Oh, I'm not questioning them meeting.
No, I understand that, but I
Some
don't
of the decisions at that level.
Let's make it very clear, and we talked about this in the last board meeting. To me, the plans are where they need to be now, and that's with this board. You're all elected representatives of your nations, your communities, your municipalities. I serve a kind of different representative role, and that's why it's probably good that I'm in this role versus the ones. This is on you. The ultimate decision on the plan will come from this board. But I do think in this case, what we're asking the TMC to do, to give us their recommendations. We've heard the directors on contingencies and what would their recommendations then be on body. I think throughout as even when we start eliminating projects, we might want to go back to them and ask very specific questions. And I'm sure if they've got a choice, but then it's ultimately our decision. Mayor Winfield. Yeah, I know you deferred to Mayor Honey, but
I'm patient to a point.
I didn't want to take you out of the queue.
I think an important lesson to learn is 10 years of PAG money being funneled, or no, that's not propping up RTA is a lesson to be learned to this board. So I think it's personally a mistake to to earmark PAG money from the outset. I'm a hard no. I think that we reserve PAG for what PAG was intended for, and RTA should stand on its own. And that's my position.
And I think this, particularly on this issue, this is what we want to hear, because if we have additional funds and how we use them, then it's what our priorities are. And I'm in firm agreement with you.
Let me just say that I think that's the rule. And of course, there's exceptions, but we'll address exceptions when those surface. But the rule should be no PAG money earmarked for RTA.
Mr. Chair.
Oh,
I'm on cue,
Mayor
Murphy. I'm on cue. I'm not as patient as Mayor Winfield.
Mayor Romero, then Mayor Murphy. And Mayor Murphy, you're going to have to always speak up because there's a lot of
Yep,
going on.
no problem.
So I know a thing or two about being outvoted on this table. And I would say, my colleagues should think about regional cooperation and participation, right? Those are RTA, those PAG dollars are coming in for the region. And I would say, you said several times, $650 million is not a loss for Tucson, and we should do it as part of regional cooperation and participation. I would ask you to do the same thing with PAG dollars. So, I think that whatever is going to have the RTA next plan fully funded and the projects that you've called out, And it really gives certainty to how we're spending those dollars. I know that before those PAG dollars that are coming from the federal and state government were put out, and I don't know what committee or person or individual made the decisions to fund projects through PAG, but I mean, just like the city of Tucson is being asked to be cooperative with the region and leave $650 million on the table, I would ask the same thing of you. I think that we need to look at the bottom line. We need to look at the actualized numbers to know how we're going to get this done.
You know, we're not making
we might not need to put the PAC dollars depending on what the actualized funds are coming in. So I think it's immature to make an absolute decision in terms of these PAC dollars right now at this moment without taking a look at what the projected numbers for the entirety of the RTA next 20 years mean. Because we might be able to say, hey, we don't need that anymore in order to make the plan work.
Agree. That's why this was on the table to talk about today, because we know where people stand. Mayor Murphy?
Yeah, no, I would just, I wanted to say I agree with Mayor Winfield that, you know, we should learn by our lessons. And we had that PAG money available because of this downturn, where if we commit it from the outset, we don't even have that as a backup down the road. And he also brought up a good point a couple of meetings ago, or maybe it was even the last one. You know, the RTA is on us and we're the decision makers of it. But if we take all those PAG dollars off the table, when it's the different mayor of all of our communities down the future, you know, we've handcuffed them without any flexibility as the needs and the changes, whether they're floods or we have a second high school that, you know, we have some needs for a traffic signal that was unexpected. So if we handcuff future mayors with future dollars, I think, you know, just like our families, we have to live within a budget. I'm fine waiting for the numbers, but I think the RTA plan should be constructed within inside of that budget and not touch those PAG dollars. Thank you.
All right, I've got Mayor Honey, then Supervisor Scott, and then I'd like to move on to the final topic.
Is it 4:30?
We can't. No, we're not there yet. Mayor Honey, I'll tell you when it says 4:30 on the clock. Maybe. No. Mayor Honey.
A couple of the things, I mean, I agree with Mayor Winfield and Mayor Murphy, obviously, but the PAG money is for the entire county. And it comes to the MPO, which is everything. We can't approve this board spending PAG money. It would have to go, now we're all the PAG board, but it would have to be at a PAG meeting to even vote to give them money. But, you know, we spend PAG money in Ajo or 3 Points or different places like that. Mount Lemon, if they have an emergency or something. That money is not necessarily supposed to be just spent in the municipalities here. It's spent throughout the entire county. And, you know, we took all the money the last time because the RTA got in trouble. And there were so many programs that weren't going to be done. I think if we take that money, you know, to prop us up, it could hurt people that aren't at this board in other communities. They may not be incorporated, but 3 Points or Ajo or, like you say, Mount Lemon or whatever. If we need to spend county money there, you know, during the fires or something like that, if we spend it all in the RTA, we don't have it. And that's just kind of my philosophy. Thank you.
Supervisor Scott.
Well, let's remind ourselves and remind the public that 100% of our regional funds are being devoted to the projects that we're deferring from RTA 1 during those first 5 years. And if we did use non-RTA funds that come in from the state and federal government. Our calculation, because this proposal did come from the county, is it would constitute 11.2% of non-RTA regional funds, 11.2%. Now, I agree with something that you said, Mr. Chair, that we should wait until the new projections come in so that we can know what we're dealing with, and Mayor Romero echoed that, but I don't think we should say unequivocally, we're not going to do this, because that would make the second thing that I've heard around this table that we've said unequivocally by just about everybody except for me, which is that we've never wanted to talk about the fact that the previous board got authorization from the Arizona legislature to have additional revenues beyond the existing half cent. We've never talked about that because just about everybody around the table has said, I don't want to talk about that. So if we're going to not talk about that and then also not talk about this, it comes back to something that we've been saying all afternoon, which is where's the money going to come from? Because eventually what we're going to start doing is cutting projects, which I think makes a plan more difficult to pass.
Thank you. And it goes back to what we've said from the very beginning. Dollars are, you can't really finalize, but the purpose and the goal of this was to have a conversation so we kind of know where people sit. So when we do get down to that point, we won't have to rehash it all. Okay. Okay. All right. Then the final issue that we had on the agenda, by the way, the item E, I've already struck, just so everybody knows that, because that is one that we had, it was more of a consideration if we got into talking about specific plans, and there's no intent to do that
I think you
today.
should put item E on every agenda. Just in case.
Just in case. We'll give the secretary director credit. He added it on that one. So the final one that we didn't talk about is what's the desire of the board, or what do we believe will be most helpful for execution of RTA going forward into the 20 years? Is that do we need to leave uncommitted dollars in the categoricals? You know, one of the reasons that we have the categoricals, the communities and municipalities, and when people came up with things that they needed that fit in one of those categoricals, we had the money that was in that categorical would come back, give the project to the board. The board could vote on it. If it got approved, it would go on the categorical. So again, because we're operating under, again, put the TMC under a position that here's how tight the funding is, and you're on a fixed budget. There was more of those categoricals that were not available for future decision. So I just want to get a sense of what the board's belief is on having funds in the categoricals that would be allowed not only your communities, not only the communities that don't have the representation, but obviously the county will come up with them. Or if in the future we have a community that becomes incorporated, or one of you annex something that's not currently incorporated, you may have different needs as well. So I just wanted to get a sense from all of you. Is it a priority to make sure that we do have some unencumbered dollars in the category?
Yes.
Yes.
I think we have to decide on the percentage.
Mayor Romero?
I'm open to deciding on the percentage, but the city of Tucson has much less funds in the named projects. And so in order for the city of Tucson to get the best return on investment, one of the reasons that we put our entire projects on every categorical is because we want to be, in our experience, when we go out to ask our voters for half cent for money, the more clarity and transparency about what we're going to do with their money, the more voters are willing to say, yes, okay, we see the value, we see what you're doing with what you're requesting. The other reason why the city of Tucson moved in the direction of putting items under the safety and active transportation elements is because in our experience with the current RTA administration and the conversations about the RTA next proposals, we have seen that if we don't use projects specifically, they are at risk. And these projects are critical priorities for the city of Tucson. and would prefer to have assurances as we go to the voters that those projects are going to be there and have funding. And so for me, it's not responsible or a possibility for the city of Tucson to go at it without having all of these projects spelled out. Again, you know, we might be able to have a cushion, but the projects that we put out are necessary in order for the Tucson taxpayers to get their return on investment. And the only way that we've been able to see visually and get assurances that these projects are going to get done is by calling them in.
And I'll come to Supervisor Scott. I got you next on the ticket. I agree that and I've said this even on the first one, and even on some of I could probably go to some of the named projects and say they belong in a category, because there are some that apply in there, and I don't think that I would not propose taking everything out of the category to justify the money. But the question is, do we want to have every category, you know, whether it's active safety, transportation, transit, all the others? We want to make sure that there is some funds available for the unforeseen, you know, or the future projects that may not be aware to now. That's just, so that was kind of the point of this conversation, is to, again, if we get more opportunities to add to these plans, money-wise, where is it we want to put something in? Because if it comes down to the point where we get to start talking about removing stuff from these plans to make our final plan remove, it's going to be, we're going to all have to look at what months. It's not going to be from one municipality or another. It's going to be what makes the best plan and what ultimately garner the greatest support, because eventually the voters are the ones that have to say no matter what we want. Supervisor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to build on the points that both you and Mayor Romero made, when we passed a motion unanimously back in December, part of that motion called for the TMC to take a look at 4.2 and 5.1 and come to us with a plan, a modified plan that not only ensured projects across the jurisdictions, but within the jurisdictions. So that, again, it was something that we could take to the voters, and no matter where anybody lives in the county, they would find a reason to vote for the project. Specific to that point, 2 of the named projects in those elements from the county are in Green Valley. And we felt that really strongly that those projects would help Green Valley residents to have a reason to vote for the RTA units.
All right, seeing no hands, I think again, we need to know the final numbers. That will help. I do think that categorical one will be fine more as we go through and where we sit. We're actually, it's only 4:20. We got 10 more minutes we can talk. One thing I just want to throw out is I want to hear from anybody if they've got any things that they want to have addressed at the next agenda. One of the 2 items that I'm probably going to put on for our consideration, just so everybody can think about. That's why I asked if you know something you want addressed. Let's bring it up now, so we've got a month to think about before we meet at our May 20. Sorry, when's our next meeting?
I'm sorry, April 4th.
April 4th. Yeah, that's right. We moved it out of the last. April 4th is our next meeting. Is I think we need to consider, and this might fall more under the policy side of it, but I think we need to consider where and how we want to review scope of projects. We spend a lot of time and money dealing with projects that want to be changed, but that's because we have no opportunity to review, whether it's a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year. This is a 20-year plan. I'm sure as elected officials, you've all seen your plan. What you think is priority today may not be the priority 5 years, but we can still build in some way for this board to review it and realize if we make a significant change to a project, we may be required to go back to the voter, and that will be something determined at that time. And then the other one's the policy statements that came today. I think we need to consider what policy statements may be advantage. Mr. McGovern, maybe you could, so he's out. We may want to see what some of theirs were, that they just for our discussion purposes. Does any members of the board have any other comments or ideas they want to either bring forward at the next meeting or anything they want to share before we close?
When you talk about, Mr. Chair, bringing to discussion the idea of changing projects as we had to do with the first RTA. Are you talking about being able to add flexibility to the needs of the projects that we've listed so far?
Yes.
Has things
And
changed?
what I think it is it's just that we go through the process of phasing all the projects. But what we haven't gone to any process where we review if the phasing of the projects is either A, correct, B, in the right order, or if some of the projects haven't significantly changed. And we've spent a lot of time around this board and in the public and in the press arguing over, hey, this project's not being done. I think, and I personally believe after watching it for 20 years, we can do that better, more efficiently, more effectively, and we may be able to achieve some greater goals. And we can have those discussions later, but just an idea of putting some how can we put flexibility in the system? Because we don't know what the technologies or what the needs are going to be 10 years from now. We're guessing. We got an idea. Some of us are more confident than others, but I think we could build that in through a policy statement of some sort that gives this board the authority.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mayor Murphy.
Yeah, and just to add off of that, Chair, I agree, but I guess I would also like to add to that, just a legal reading on that, because I remember all my years on the school board, that, when you go out for an election, if you say you're going to build a, $3 million pool, you don't get to build a $3 million park. So I'd like a legal reading on that as well, when we have that discussion on, how much danger or not are we, if you build in that kind of a policy, if you go to the voters and you're saying you're spending X money for X product, and then we change that. If you could just add a legal reading of that, I'd appreciate it as well.
Absolutely, Mayor Murphy. We'll have the executive director and the staff take a look at what legally we can. And it may just be, we'll talk about that. But I do agree.
Yeah, thanks.
We do not want to do anything illegal.
Thank you for that.
All right. Anybody else on the Chairman Jose?
Chairman and other members of the board and members in the audience. Bro Jose, Chairman of the Commission. Actually, my first meeting, kind of catch you guys, but I missed you well.
It's good to have you.
I just want to say, the last few minutes that we have here, Dawn Automation has members that live, work, travel, do business, have businesses in all your jurisdictions. And I know that each and every one of you have a right and a passion for your areas. I've been watching this RTA and PEG, for some time. Chairman Manuel very committed to this, and so will we as well to come to some resolution on all these issues. I think Mayor Romero has some good points. You all have good points in there, but at some point we need to make those decisions. And I think this group has done so in the past, and moving forward, will make sure we satisfy. I'm sitting here looking at projects and looking at this stuff. What directly benefits the Dawn Automation? It may not directly benefit, but it benefits our members and other Native Americans that live, work, and do all that stuff in your jurisdiction. So we're here to be part of the team, part of the solution, and looking at this as the glass half full, not half empty. That's all I want to say. It's a great time.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Unless I see somebody throw a hand up, I think that's a great closing comment to finish on. So thank you for those comments, Chairman Jose, and welcome to the first meeting. The PAG one, make sure you get here in time for lunch, because when it's PAG RTA, it's a lot longer.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we're adjourned early.
Thank you.
Something about the horse.